Bookie Wonder Podcast, Season 1, Episode 1, Take 1. Action. Oh no, the lens cap is on. Hi everyone, welcome to the Bookie Wonder Podcast. I am Bookie Wonder. And today I am going to be talking about how to get into the film industry from the crew perspective. There's no one way to get into the film industry, but today I have Dan with me to share his story. Thank you so much for joining me, Dan.
Well, thanks for having me on.
So tell me, how did you get into this film industry?
Oh, okay. I'm going to start way back at the beginning, which is you have to be interested in the industry to begin with. And to do that, you need some sort of idea of media production, content creation, and something that drives you to sort of like want to head off in that trajectory before you even make the decision how to get into the industry. So for me, that was starting off in high school in communications and productions technology class, and that I took it as an option. And I think I was the only student in the school who ended up taking all three levels of it. So CPT 10, CPT 20, CPT 30. And we did everything in there from Photoshop to, short film production to presentation production. We covered the gamut of it, basically. And what I was finding I had the most interest in was actually once we were done filming and sitting down in front of a computer and editing. So bringing together all these different elements that you'd shot that day or the previous day and putting them into a sequential order and creating something, changing things that way. So once I was done that in high school, I was like, you know what? I gotta investigate this. I think I received an award for academic excellence for doing editing video productions in my school. So I was like, I've got a passion for this. I've got a talent for this, I hope, or I might be very lucky. And I just need to follow this through. So a couple of years after I finished high school, I applied at SAIT. I got into their film and video production program in 2012, and I graduated that program in 2014. So thus begun post-film school, thus begun my career in the industry.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think I'm a bit curious. How did you gain interest? Was it just something that was done at your school, or you just picked up the interest and was just curious about this?
It wasn't. It was done at my school, obviously, because they had a course for it, but it wasn't a huge focus. Like, I think we had far more students in my class going to agriculture, for example, agriculture class, than went into the computers class. So for me, I've always been fascinated and interested in technology. And so this was this was a balance between the creative and the technical, I found. There was the technical, like you must know how to proficiently do something, and you got to know, you got to know the basics of framing, you got to know the basics of what makes a picture too bright or too dark, very basic field line stuff without losing it to like, I want to say like computer madness, There's a lot of people get interested in technology, like especially computers and stuff like that, who go in to become programmers or comp sci or anything like that. And it was, I don't know, the idea of like not being able to also explore creativity in that field just didn't appeal to me as much. So media creation and content production, and later film and TV, it found that niche between technical proficiency and creative freedom.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So did you, did your program at SAIT?
Yes.
Did that prepare you for the real world?
To some degree. But I think some of what it didn't teach me, and I don't know if it can be taught, is they mention it, but you don't really think about it. There's no guaranteed job waiting for you once you finish this program. There's no way to be like, oh yeah, I finished the film program, here's my film degree, please give me one job. Uh, so, and I don't think that's the fault of the program. I think it was my fault for not putting two and two together, that when they said that, they actually meant it. So it was a struggle for a little bit. Because I left the program and I thought I knew exactly what I wanted, and I was like, here is the place where I'm going to work, and I'll go and apply there. And then they're not hiring anybody right now. Okay, what do I do now? And it kind of turned it on my head, turned it on its head for me. I was like, okay, well, what about this freelance thing? What if I go freelance? What if I'm not connected to a large production company? And so I started that. I started doing freelance work, and basically I rediscovered a repassion in the film industry for. I always knew I was attracted to sound, but I was finding I was enjoying my life less and less sitting in front of a computer editing the same scene for 12 hours a day, listening to the same dialogue over and over, trying to tweak that or move that. And I was getting tired of the project, so I figured, well, why don't I switch to recording? And so I started building up equipment and volunteering on projects. Just volunteering wherever somebody needed a sound person, and I could fit that bill. And I learned a lot that way, honestly. It's just practical, in-field production as opposed to theory.
Okay.
So getting back to your original question, did it prepare me for the real world? Yes, in that I was able to switch from one discipline to a related discipline without a huge learning gap or without being completely unsure of myself. And I can also work in other areas, other departments without being completely clueless. But I feel like there was some personal growth that needed to happen there as well, simultaneously, that I had to play catch up with. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I have two questions, popping up in my head from what you've just said.
Right.
But I want to address this now. There's a common myth on both sides. You don't need to
Right.
go to film school.
Mm-hmm.
You need to go to film schools. People, depending on how successful you are on the path you chose. So in your experience, having gone to film school for 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
would you say that that's a requirement to actually have a career in this industry?
I would say it's a requirement for some people.
Okay.
Some people, like when I started in film school, I knew some things, but I didn't know a lot of things that now, knowledge-wise, I just take for granted. Like I didn't know the difference between a grip and a gaffer. I didn't know the difference between a producer and an assistant director. These roles and stuff like that. I didn't know that there was a film industry or a film union, for example, in Calgary. I didn't know any of that, mostly because I hadn't done my research. But what film school did for me was to sort of get me asking more questions and exploring, and giving me good information, a good basis of experienced information from the instructors to work off of. And from there, I was able to, pique my interest a little more, do some more research, figure some more stuff out. As far as whether or not everyone needs to go to film school, there are some people who I know who literally just walked on set one day, through a friend or something like that, and have been working in the industry since. And there are some who I know who have done film school, and they've gone on to be, successful in the industry as well. So it's not a requirement, I'm going to say, but if you understand what you need to get out of the program, it definitely helps.
Okay.
And even just having access to equipment, I felt that was a big thing. We got to work with professional, like industry grade equipment right off the bat,
Right.
stuff that you can't even rent from a lot of local camera places right now. We got to work with an Arri Alexa, which is huge name in cameras. This is the first or second year that the Alexa actually came out, and we got to get hands-on experience with that right away. Instead of like, okay, well, I've shot this on my little point and shoot DSLR. You get the high level experience right away. And once you feel comfortable in that technology, we're working with, a $250,000 camera or something like that. Well, not a quarter of a million, but
Well,
with all the bells and whistles, I'd say about 100,000 with all the lenses and stuff like that. But once you get comfortable working with that camera, you start to be able to just sort of apply it to anything. You're not necessarily
learning from the scratch.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you can look at a smaller, less expensive camera, and you can be like, okay, well, it doesn't have the same this, and this is the expensive one, but I can tweak the settings, and I've learned the settings well enough that I can make it work. So, yeah, honestly, personally, I'll speak from experience here. Personally, going to film school, I don't think I'd be in the industry today if I hadn't gone to film school. Just because it taught me the questions that I needed to figure out for myself. Okay. And that helped to narrow my focus and sort of drive home what I needed to learn.
So from what I'm hearing from you now is everybody's path is different. Some people need to go to film school depending on what your background is. Some people may already have exposure, or some people may just find themselves already in there and they learn on the job and then get straight to it. One that you can move in different areas on the film crew, without going back to school for it?
It's a great question. So when I went to school, they had 3 disciplines that you got to choose from in second year. There was producer-director, which you were focusing more on above-the-line creation, the craft technical, which was everything on set to do with shooting a film, and then lastly, post-production, the editing team. So I specifically drove myself into the post-production stream, because that's what I was interested in. But I wanted to refine it a bit more, so I also primarily focused on sound editing. And in that regard, I could still do picture editing, proficiently to a degree. We had to learn that. But my interest was always in sound editing, creating with sound. And so I was able to pick up and learn, you learn what is a sound wave, how does sound interact with the environment around you. You learn the technical stuff for producing in digital sound, you learn your kilohertz, you learn your bit depth, you learn all these technical things, because they apply to both producing or production sound and the post-production sound. So there's a fair amount of crossover there. So I feel like that sort of, it was fairly, I was able to, I'm trying to think of how to word this. The crossover for me wasn't as severe because they were very related. They were just slightly different in their application towards each other. Kind of like how if you're a post-production supervisor or a producer, I'm sure there's a lot of crossover there. Or if you're an editor who has, camera experience, and you understand, okay, well, the reason you have the intelligence to explain what is good or bad about your product because you have because you have the further knowledge gained from another field, another stream. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. So it's 2021 right now.
Is it?
Yes, it is.
We're making it.
So if someone was to say, Dan, I want to be a crew. I don't know what to do right now. I just know I'm interested in film, the behind the scene. What would you say is the first point that person needs to? What's the first point for them? And I'm still trying to also figure out what exactly it is. What would you say the first point is for such a person?
I'd say the first point would actually be try to find someone in your network or your community who is in the industry in some way, shape, or form, and buy them lunch. Take them out for lunch and just ask questions, because there's so many different attitudes, philosophies, anything and everything, and you need to decide before anything else. You need to decide if what's my level of interest. Is this something that I'd like to do for YouTube as a hobby, or do I want to work on big budget movie productions? Or do I want to just improve my TikTok videos? What level of interest are you taking in media production and in the film and TV industry? And if you can find someone, or if you can, I know we're a little bit restricted right now just with COVID, but there's filmmaker meetups you can go to, just to meet with people, and you can go and just introduce yourself and ask questions, because you're going to find out pretty quickly it's not all glitz and glamour like you might imagine it to be. Or maybe you don't, I don't know. But we work long, hard days, anywhere from 10 hours is a short day. 12 hours is usually what we end up doing. And depending on the scope of the budget and the film and what needs to be done that day, that can keep going on to beyond 16 hours. So, you can be sitting down for your lunch break and realize you have an entire person's day of work 8 hours ahead of you still. And, some people just, they haven't trained themselves, or they aren't built to deal with that kind of pressure, that kind of stress, that kind of, that kind of lifestyle. It's the same way that some people aren't built to be fitness experts, or some people aren't built to be computer experts, or whatever. It's the same thing. It does require a lot from you, and especially when you're starting out, it requires a lot from you for not a lot of compensation. You're going to work that 16-hour day, and the best part is it's going to be volunteer. You're not going to be paid for that day. You're just doing it so you can add something to your resume. Basically,
you need the experience.
You need the experience. You need the credit to prove almost that you can deal with that level. Because the second that somebody's paying you,
they expect some level.
They expect some level. You can't just like show up and then really like, okay, it's 3:00. I promised my friend I'd be meeting him for dinner, so bye. Well, you can do that, but they'll say, okay, bye, don't ever come back.
You won't be in that industry for a very long time.
Again. Exactly. Okay. So, and I want to talk about that a bit more in terms of how much free work you do when you're starting out your career, but we can focus on that a little bit later.
Okay, sounds good. I think it's important that you mentioned that, because I've had my own fair share of free work, even where I had to pay my money to get into some things just to gain the experience. So I hear you when you say that. So now, at what point, because there's sometimes you can take a lot of free work that it can get abusive. So at what point do you say, this is the height, I've had enough, I have a lot of experience, this is the time to start charging? And what does that look like? What does that conversation look like? Or how do you build yourself to that point that, okay, yes, I'm worth this amount of money now?
So I struggled with that a little bit, starting out, trying to figure out what is my value, essentially, and you have to balance that with sometimes you might be working full-time or part-time at another job, and you can't commit fully to a project because we all need money. We all need to pay rent and eat food. So I think the line that I always drew for myself is I can't ever be out of pocket for working on a production unless I feel that the credit or the experience or whatever that I'm getting is going to compensate for that investment that I'm making. So biggest example was started working on a web series, and I bought what equipment I could with what money I had at the time, and I would bring that, but I would explain to production ahead of time, like, okay, you have 5 people talking in this scene, and I have 2 microphones, so I'm happy to do what I can with what I have, but production needs to figure out how to rent 3 more microphones. And that's not for a small indie shoot, that's not a huge expense. Microphones you can rent from places in town for $35 per mic. So that's a starting point. And they're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. We're not expecting you to go out and rent the microphones for our production and stuff like that. And the a part of it is also transporting yourself to and from set. The gas mileage, for example. So the rule I always set is if it's in Calgary somewhere, I'll probably end up spending that gas anyways, driving to the grocery store or whatever. I can do it. But if it's 3 days of shooting and you're out in Canmore for all 3 of those days, that's 200 kilometers there and back every day. So 600 kilometers of wear and tear on your car, of gas money. It's a full tank of gas. So talk to production and say, hey, I know we're outside the city. Is there any way? And sometimes they'll be like, no, we can't afford it, but we can carpool you. Great. I'm not putting wear and tear on my car. I'm just getting out there. And there's been one or two cases where I've just been like, okay, I'll be working with someone who I know that getting myself in front of them is going to be far more beneficial for my career than any, small compensation honorarium that they're going to offer me. So I'm actually okay with, having to potentially go out of pocket for renting an extra mic or something like that, because I'll be working with or working under someone who can help me advance my career. But very rarely does that happen. I've only had 2 instances where I was like, you know what, I'm taking a financial hit for this, but it's okay, it's worth it. So basically, and some people are okay with, saying like, I don't care if I have to spend $100 to be on this production, and that's you. But personally, I always feel the only thing that you should be asked to contribute is your time and your energy,
not your money.
You shouldn't. I've seen productions where it's like, we'll let you be our sound guy if you make $100 donation to our Indiegogo. And I'm like, so not only do you want all of the equipment that I bring,
and the talent, and the
my
skills,
professionalism, my experience,
you want my money too,
but you also want me to pay for you to the pleasure of working on your set, and it just. That doesn't fly for me. It's always, I have to be getting something out of this, be it experience, be it money, be it sometimes equipment. I worked on a production where they were like, at the end of the show, you can keep this particular piece of equipment. Done. All right.
And I think that's a fair ask, anybody should have. And from what I'm hearing, you're saying here that you need to just know what value means to you and what you're getting out of any production that you're saying yes to.
Yes.
Basically. And you determine that even from the very get-go, so you don't need to wait to have 1, 2, 5 years experience before you decide, okay, this is what compensation looks like to me on this project, on that project, on a project basis. So now let's go to some interesting parts about you.
Oh, God.
So tell me, what's the one project that you've had the most fun working on?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if I can pick just one. There's been a lot of productions I've been on that have just been, typically I find they're more in the indie production world, just because, if you're in indie production, you're not getting paid full rate. Sometimes you're getting paid barely minimum wage or less than minimum wage, depending on what you've agreed to. And you just, you need to have a good crew to work with to sort of just like, hey, you're here for 16 hours and you're not getting paid that much. I'm here for 16 hours and not getting paid that much. Let's just have some fun. Because if we're not having fun, why the hell are we doing this? So, the most fun I would say was a film that we shot up in Edmonton. It was also one of the longer projects I've worked on. But it was extremely minimalist crew. This would have been 2016, 2017, somewhere in there. And it was myself, one of my camera buddies from in town here, and then the director and producer were both from Toronto, and they brought in, I think, an associate producer as well. And then I think the director's wife came as well. But that was it. That was basically it. It was an 8-person crew shooting a movie in Edmonton for, I think the total was 87 days that we were up there for. And, you know, there were some days that were better than others, but at the end of the day, because we had to grab an Airbnb to live up there in Edmonton because we couldn't drive every 3 hours every single day and 3 hours back. So we'd end up in our Airbnb and we'd just talk about what happened during production during the day, what was fun, what wasn't, and we got to shoot some cool stuff. We got to hang out at the side of a car while we were like going down a street. We got to meet the Edmonton Police Service when they were wondering why the hell it's 3 a.m. and we're filming outside of a church. You know, it was very much seat of the pants kind of stuff, you know. And I feel like that just sort of, I don't know, once you put a 90-day shoot on your resume, that's like, I'm not going to say it's make or break, but it's certainly like, okay, you had the guts to stick in there and not quit.
Wow, that was a 90-day straight up shoot?
Yeah. I think we were up there for, it was 87 or 97 days. I can't remember which. Yeah, no, but you know, there's an initial jitters because it was like, wow, this is a long-term production. But by the end of it, it was just like, you know what, we're having fun. We're making something fun. And you get to know the cast, you get to know the crew. Well, crew was very small, so that was easy. But you know, you start making, you know, interpersonal connections with the crew, and then we all got drunk off our butts at the end at the wrap party at the end of the shoot, and yeah, we just had a good time.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess maybe that's some of the perks that come with, you know, working on probably a smaller budget. So what has been your experience? I wouldn't say you should choose, but what has been your experience working on a smaller indie project and working on a big budget, for instance?
So big budget pays better.
Definitely.
You're pulling out your phone on the side and you're like, we're 2 hours overtime.
Oh.
Okay. I don't mind as much anymore. You know, but with the independent world, there's definitely more of a sense of fun because it's like I said, you know, there's more. You have to get along with each other and have fun. Otherwise, it's just going to be a miserable time, and you're not getting paid as much as you would be on a full project. So, you know, you laugh, you joke, you have fun with the people in your department, people around you. You know, if the cast are up for it, you interact with the cast and have fun with them. Yeah, it's so yeah, I would say those are the two defining features. You make more on a big budget, but I would say you have more fun and less stress on an independent production.
So you talked about your school. Can you tell me about your first experience right out of school? Like, what was the very first job and who hired you?
I would say the very first job I did was a short film we shot in, literally it was shot in one day, at the producer's house, for, I think it was a $25 honorarium, you know?
In 2014? Was this in 2014?
That would have been 2014 or 2015, yes.
Okay.
And yeah, it was basically, I mean, you know, showed up and I didn't have, I remember I had my mixer and I think I had one wireless mic. I didn't even have a boom mic. So we were using a rented boom mic for recording it. And then a whole bunch of rented wireless mics because I think we had 6 actors talking at once.
Wow.
And the problem that it encountered in the past was all the recorders that they had rented or bought only had 2 or 4 inputs, so they didn't have enough recording space for all of the actors simultaneously. And so when I showed up and my machine had 8 inputs, they were just like, "Holy crap, we can actually get this done." Okay, but that was the thing. That was, you know, I was making $25 for that shoot after spending, I would say probably, you know, $2,000, $2,500 just for the recorder and one microphone.
Oh, wow.
You know? So
That's some dedication right there.
exactly. So and like I did the math in my head, right? I'm like, so if I make $25 every day, and I've spent 3,000 or $2,500 on a recorder, it will take me exactly 100 days
To make your money
to make
back.
my money back to break even. Meanwhile, that's not accounting for gas money. That's not accounting for food. That's not accounting for rent. That's not all these other things. It's not accounting for my cell phone bill even. Um, so but it got it started. I met a whole bunch of people on there who I'm still friends with or in touch with or still work in the industry with. So it was an excellent networking experience in that regard. And I came in as an unknown. They had no idea if I had ever done anything to do with sound, and I left a good impression, I feel. So the benefits I feel, and I'm still in contact with some of those people to this day. And I've worked with them on their projects, and they've literally said, "Hey, contact this person. They're looking for a sound guy. I'm going to recommend you." So, um, leaving a good impression and working for as little as $25 for one day. It was a long day too. It was like 12 hours in Airdrie, so I had to drive from my house to Airdrie. But it led to bigger and better things. So, it's that was my first experience, was working on that.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, I think this ties back to what you said. Deciding on the value.
Yes.
You get to decide that. What is the value of this work to me, and that's good. Okay, so a couple more questions before I let you go.
All right.
As far as Calgary is concerned, and maybe Alberta in general, how easy is it to find work as a crew?
God.
Yeah.
In what context? Like compared to other places, or
No, well, right now, I know we're probably still going to have people work from different parts of the country or even different parts of the world. But right now, we're starting off in Calgary,
right?
and for someone looking to start, I'm asking this question from a place of I'm looking to be on the crew. So, for instance, I just did the African Family series, and I had so many people reaching out saying, "Oh, how do I get into the industry? I have this resume, I have that resume, I've gone to school, I've done this. I'm looking to be a part of the crew. I'm looking to be a part of that. And I had all of those things,
Right.
And so." That's where my question is coming from. So for people that have also gone to school like yourself, even those who haven't gone to school but they've worked on other projects or they're just passionate, if they're looking at the financial side of things, how what would you say to such a person? I know this industry is a bit tough in Alberta, in Calgary, but I want to hear from you, and I'm sure the audience would want to hear from you who has this experience.
Right. So, Calgary, and I guess as a wider part of that, Alberta has a very respected film history. We're not the biggest. Vancouver takes Hollywood North. Toronto takes a lot of production as well. And now Manitoba is starting to almost eclipse us. But we have a long. Oh, I'm flunking on the numbers right now, but I think it's over 100 years that we've had a history of shooting films here. And there's I'm sure some people who are in the union right now who have been here for all those 100 years. No, I'm kidding. It can be difficult trying to enter the industry, just given a multitude of factors. The current economic climate is not super hot, and a lot of what when you're not working on film and TV, you busy yourself in the corporate world. We're very very big in corporate oil and gas and stuff like that. But right now, things are not too hot for that sector. We are currently we're working with the current provincial government to increase the competitiveness of our industry as compared to other jurisdictions like BC and Ontario, in terms of film incentives, so tax credits and just working on the premise that, if you're going to spend money, if you're going to increase the GDP of Alberta, then you can rest assured that you're going to be, we're open for business. But so we're working with the provincial government to improve those, to make us more competitive with other jurisdictions. But it's not going to be an overnight change. Nothing ever is. It's not going to be magically at midnight. Oh, boom, we've switched over. We're done. Everything's good and happy now. So right now, I think one of the biggest things you can do to get into the industry is to start working on making your own, finding people to make your own content with, and sort of get your feet wet that way. Because if you and a group of friends get together and you find out, wow, nobody really has the energy to film a short YouTube video on the weekend, doesn't get any easier from there. It only gets more difficult from there. So, if you're serious about it and you're really set on getting into the industry, then I almost feel like you need to just keep your motivation level at that level. Keep being hungry, keep wanting to get in, and keep exploring options. Find the local filmmaker groups. CSIF is the Calgary Society of Independent Filmmakers is a great group, or great place to start. They've got gear that you can rent from them for your small productions. They have post-production facilities. They have spaces you can rent out. I'm pretty sure not during the pandemic right now because we're shut down, but spaces that can basically help you start working on a creative journey. And like we do at Simba Creative. And just keep pursuing that passion, keep pushing, because you're going to need that drive, because it gets tiring.
It gets tiring
after a while. It's a long journey. It's not as simple, I want to be this, I'm going to be this. It's, I want to be this, let me plan out the next 5-10 years of how I'm going to make that happen. And, it's... I don't know.
It's a marathon. It's a marathon.
It's a marathon, exactly.
It's
not as simple
a sprint. Yeah.
as I took an online course and now I've switched professions. You're going to spend the next decade of your life figuring out, and then after that, maybe you okay, now I know where I want to be in the industry. Because you might start as a production assistant on an indie production, and then you're like, wow, I don't have the energy to be on set that long. So then you look at being an office production assistant. It's like, oh, I'm in the office. I have a little more stability that way. I can go and run that. You'll use the skill set that you already have. If you're an accountant, films need accountants to run the numbers. They need, if you're a carpenter or a welder, they need people to construct the sets. Find out if you can get in that way. If you know anybody who can get in that way. If you, already have an online presence in some filming gear from you making your own YouTube videos or something like that, look at how you can expand and how you can learn about that, and potentially get on as a camera person for a production. I keep not mentioning the sound department specifically because we're full. We've got enough people.
Oh my goodness, you are trying to keep people out.
Just the right amount of work for all of us. We got a good thing going.
So he's trying to get you out. So don't listen to him. He's trying to get you out.
Sound is a unique department in that there's not a lot for you to do outside of sort of film and TV. Most YouTube videos you don't hire a sound guy for. So it's a big gear investment, $100,000 of gear easily to be properly set up. And you need to be, honestly, in the meantime, you need to have some other skill sets to fall back on for when things are kind of in the doldrums, in the tanks, But no, honestly, if you have a passion for sound, then follow that passion. Absolutely. You might have to go to Vancouver temporarily to pursue that further, but no, never Never stop being passionate, because the second you stop being passionate, you stop being hungry, you stop. You sit back and you rest on your laurels and you think, that's it, that's enough. I can just coast from here. Somebody with more energy is just gonna pass you, and they're gonna pick up that next job, and the next thing you know, you're like, I haven't worked in 6 months. What happened? I thought the jobs would just come to me. No, you can't ever get passive with it. You have to be aggressive. So. I don't know if I answered your question or
No,
not.
I think you did. I'm just processing all of the things that you said, and I think it's valid. And honestly, this is part of why I'm doing this podcast, because I want people to know this, to have what it is, to know what it takes, right? So if you want, it's a long journey. It's a marathon.
Yes.
It's not a sprint. You have to be ready for that, and it's in any industry, but I think particularly with the film industry, it's more peculiar because there's no 9 to 5 kind of a job, unless you're choosing, like, I'm going to work in a production company in their office, but if you want to work on film projects, it's just the way it is. Even as a producer, as a director, in any other role that you want to fill behind the scenes. So that's valid. And, guys, you've heard, all that Dan has to share, in regards to that. So if you want to get into this industry, you're not just going to just get in and just cruise your way. Obviously, there's some people that are lucky, but, probably that's 1% of 1% of the people. Dan, before you go, any other final words for people? Okay, there is actually one particular question I've been itching to ask. Tell me about union and non-union. Even as a person who is in the film industry, I know a bit about union, and I've heard so many things, and I have enough information for myself. But for people who are listening out there, as you, what does it take to be a union member? Is it something that you can just apply to go into, or how does that work?
So I'll expand on this question a little bit more. There's multiple unions that are involved in film production.
So let me just cut you a little bit. Can you also tell us what a union is and what a non-union is? So for people that are like, what the heck is that?
So union production will typically fall under the jurisdiction of one or more unions that act as a collective bargaining agent for the particular people that they represent. So just really quickly, some of the unions we have. Probably the most common one that I'm most familiar with working with is with ACTRA. They represent actors and just base general talent. Anybody who has an agent, representation, stuff like that. So for example, here in Calgary we have IATSE 212, and they represent everybody who works on the majority of films that come through town here. And then you can have DGC, the Directors Guild of Canada, and that's more for above the line producers, directors, sort of that. IATSE in Calgary at least also covers post-production now.
Okay.
So editors and what have you there. So usually the big difference between union and non-union comes down to budget. If it's a big enough budget project and it's in the jurisdiction, usually productions will just want to work directly with the union, because the union's the one who scrambles around to find people when they're like, we need 5 more people for tomorrow. It's like, okay, let's go through our list of people, we'll call them, and they'll accept the work and they'll show up on time. They're vetted professionals, basically. Non-union can include some of those people. Some unions are okay with that. So, for example, IATSE, if a smaller budget production comes to town and their members want to go work on it, IATSE usually just says, yeah, go ahead. Just, don't be under the illusion that you have the same bargaining agreement that you would under something under our jurisdiction. Because they know their members have to eat, and not you can't always take the big Hollywood blockbuster productions that come into town. Whereas I'm less familiar with ACTRA. An ACTRA member doesn't work on anything that they haven't vetted or agreed on yet. And I think once you become a member of the actor union, you have, I think it's like 5 pro bono agreements, like free agreements you can do or something like that. And then everything else has to be vetted, and like you get paid a certain way and paid a certain scale, and they have to check you in and out, all that sort of thing. So the big difference is budget. Smaller budget stuff will usually not fall under the union because it's too much paperwork for too little
Money.
Too little money. Exactly. They're not interested. Whereas union stuff, usually anything big that comes through, from Hollywood or concerts or stuff that gets set up at the Saddle Dome, for example, that's also a union gig. So, or the Jube, all these fall under the same union sort of umbrella. So, different unions have different rules about what you can and cannot work on, and most of them are based around seniority. So if you've been in the union for 20 years, you get the call to work on a show before the guy who's been in for 10 years. And that's just sort of how that rolls. They go down, people have been in the union longest, the first, and then start moving down the line as they say, oh, no, I'm already working on another show, or oh, no, I'm not interested.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, sounds good. I think that's a good clarification. And any final words for any aspiring crew out there?
It's yeah. Give me a sec. You'll find out very quickly whether or not you have the patience, the energy, the drive to make it in the film industry, or even get your foot in the door at the film industry. You have to walk a line sometimes between, extreme volunteerism versus exploitation when you're starting out. Nobody can make the decisions for you as to what's worth it for you. But the biggest thing I have to say is, even if you are in the middle, if you're in the middle of a production and you suddenly realize, this isn't for me, I don't want to be in this department, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm sick and tired of this, finish the production. That's the biggest thing I can say. Because even if you do a subpar job and you're clearly not into it, the crew will have infinitely more respect for you if you finish and then just never do that again than if you say, that's it, I'm done, I quit. Because I know some people who have literally worked 2 days and then they called the head of their department and they said, hey, this isn't for me, I'm done.
Wow.
And they just left the whole production hanging for, now we're down a man or a woman. And more than anything, that's, I guess the way that I'll explain that is, you need to be comfortable with working with people, and you need to be pleasant to work with. I think networking is a huge part of like getting yourself into the industry firsthand, because it's going to be that person that calls you and says, hey, come work on my show for this weekend, or hey, I need a favor, or hey, I do that. That's how you build relationships, and that's probably I'd say, if not the most important, then the second most important of getting in this industry is networking. It's about who you know. So you need drive, but you also need someone who knows that you have that drive. So...
And you're disciplined.
Yes, exactly. So try not to piss people off. You're going to piss people off, Doesn't matter what happens. Even if you're literally doing exactly your job, you're going to piss somebody off someday, and that happens. But being able to professionally move beyond that and just be like, we make mistakes, I'm going to learn for next time, I'm going to improve next time, and showing that discipline and that improvement, that'll impress people a lot more, and that'll make it a heck of a lot easier for you to get yourself into the industry, I think.
Okay, sounds good. I mean, this has been really helpful. I believe I've learned so many things too. And that's been great. So thank you so much, Dan, for joining us
You're
again
very
today.
welcome. Yeah.
I do hope that you've learned one or two things today on how to get into the industry. There's so many useful tips and links that Dan has talked about. The CSIF, and you can read up a lot of the things. Google them, search them, talk to people. You can also reach out to Dan. I'm going to put his handle, and go out for coffee. Like I said, buy him lunch. So buy him lunch, buy him coffee, get him out. And not just him, ask for recommendations. When you talk to somebody, ask them if they have somebody else that you can talk to, and do your due diligence, do your research. I do believe that this industry is one that a lot of people can get in if you're willing to do the work. Until I come your way next time, have a pleasant day. Bye-bye now.